What it do, what the business is. Word on the street, J International know how to handle his. Tapping back in once again. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you can get all the latest updates. So this is a continuation of me expounding on how we went wrong with the whole civil rights thing, and how we dropped the ball. In particular, how the ball was dropped with this strong desire and hunger to integrate with white people. We gave up all of our independence so that we can just be amongst them. And how once that ball was dropped, it was dropped with the baby boomers, and it was over. After that point, it was over. So as of recent, I've been reading a massive book, a intellectual massive powerhouse. This is my third time reading this massive intellectual book by this great warrior scholar who is now an ancestor, by the name of Dr. Amos N. Wilson. And the name of the book that I'm referring to is called Blueprint for Black Power, a moral, political, and economic imperative for the 21st century. And as I said, this is my third time reading this book because it's over 800 pages. Part of it was done while he was alive, and the other part was done after he had transcended. But there's so much great information in it that you just can't read it one time and think that you're gonna get it all. You're gonna have to double back 2, 3, 4 times. So as I said, this is my third time, and each time that I read it, I learn something new, I learn something different. And in particular, I want to focus on this particular chapter that it just really stood out to me, and it really explains and shows how the civil rights and the baby boomers dropped the ball. So the name of the chapter, I have it right before me. So the name of the chapter is called Empowerment Through Wealth. And the section that I'm going to read to you and I'm going to focus on is basically he's explaining how we had all of these, how foundational Black Americans, we were forced to be entrepreneurs. But even going back to ancient times, the African race has always been a race of entrepreneurship. And so in this one right here, he talks about all of the milestones that foundational Black American entrepreneurs made in this country. So I'm just going to read some of this so that you guys can really understand how, when I say that we were failed, us millennials, us Gen Xers, how us Gen Zs, I get them mixed up, but how we were failed by the actions of our elders. So here we go. And this is not, what I'm reading is not the civil rights generation, is not the baby boomers generation, is before them. So let's go into it. Anthony Johnson was probably the first person of African descent to become an entrepreneur in the New World. Having arrived in America before the Pilgrims, he accumulated property in Jamestown, Virginia. The first wholesaler, merchant, and settler of Chicago, Jean-Baptiste du Sable, was also a businessman and capitalist. As America began to take shape as one of the leading capitalistic countries, Afro-Americans, what I like to call, and what we should call ourselves, is foundational Black Americans, tried to carve out a business place for themselves. Afro-Americans developed enterprises in almost every area of business community prior to the Civil War, including merchandising, real estate, manufacturing, construction trades, transportation, and extractive industries. This underscores the fact that foundational Black Americans are woven historically into the economic fabric of America and cannot be looked upon in totality as a recent arrived ethnic group. What that means, we not immigrants. We didn't immigrate here. We were forced here, and if you read, they came before Columbus. A lot of us were already here. So we are the foundation of this country. We built this country. Without us, this country would be nothing. And we are not immigrants. We have never been immigrants. So let us continue. The reality of slavery was that slaves, despite acquired skills, could not become entrepreneurs in the true sense of the word. Nevertheless, the fact that some degree of Afro-American entrepreneurship has been documented as existing during slavery is testimony to the fact that this form of capitalism is able to exist under the most extreme conditions. Even under the greatest hardships of slavery, Ku Klux Klan, we were still able to make it happen, to be entrepreneurs. We were still able to, build things, function, make moves. We still had that ability. In the late 1700s and the 1800s, foundational Black American entrepreneurs were simultaneously involved in almost every major industry during this time period. This was especially true in the North, where they excelled in all of the important occupations and formed an impressive and cohesive business class. The Negro in the South was not only proficient as a carpenter, blacksmith, shoemaker, baker, tailor, and cook, but as a result of almost 2.5 centuries of slavery up to the outbreak of the Civil War, the knowledge of these skills was concentrated almost exclusively in the hands of Negroes, free and slaves. See, there's a saying that I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the saying, but I've heard it before, is that to see a hammer or a screwdriver in the hands of a white man at that time was like seeing the abominable snowman. Because during that time, we were doing all the work. We were all the tradesmen because they didn't have to do anything. We were the slaves. So we were forced to work, and we learned in the process all these tradesman skills that we had. We just learned it naturally. We didn't have to go to no trade school. We just, one learned game, he passed it on to the other. Let us continue. Despite hardships presented by governmental restrictions, see, and this is why we need reparation, because the government was heavily involved in this, and white racist social attitudes and practices. Wherever there were free foundational Black Americans, a business tradition was developed. You see? In 1838, a pamphlet, perhaps the first of its kind, was published entitled A Register of of trades of colored peoples in the city of Philadelphia and district. It listed 656 persons engaged in 57 different occupations. The register also listed businesses which were independently run by women of African descent. So the sisters were getting down as well. During the 1700s and 1800s, foundational Black Americans dominated and controlled a number of businesses, niches, and figured significantly in other business areas. Many of the businesses were lucrative and many business persons made a fortune. A significantly large number are a class of free Black artisans, grocers, barbers, caterers, hotel owners, coal dealers, tailors, blacksmiths, craftsmen, and professionals existed prior to the Civil War. In a number of places, those Blacks played a leading role or dominant role in certain trades, and their numbers increased after the war. A number of Atlanta's most important contractors and real estate dealers were Black during the 1800s and well past the 1900s. In Charleston, South Carolina, the butcher's trade and barbering were at one time dominated by Blacks. We dominated that. Black entrepreneurs were the backbone of the shoemaking trade, and until after World War I, among the city's most prominent contractors. Before the Civil War, foundational Black American entrepreneur Tommy Lafond of New Orleans achieved considerable notoriety as a merchant, moneylender, and real estate dealer. When he died in the 1880s, he left an estate worth $500,000. Now, to all my mathematicians and economists, do the calculations of what that would translate to now. This was in the 1880s. But now, translated to 2022, what would that calculate to? In the late 1800s, entrepreneur Willie Jones not only generated a reputed fortune of some $200,000 through farming, horse trading, liquor selling, and transportation, but also through his ownership of a streetcar line in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. We had our own transportation. When R.R. Church died in 912 in Memphis, he had reportedly accumulated a fortune of over $1 million gained through speculation and investment in Memphis real estate, as well as investment in white-owned corporations. According to historian August Meyer, from whose work the 6 prior citations were drawn, there was a real burgeoning of Negro enterprise after 1890 and especially after 1900s, though it was based more on the Negro market than there were earlier enterprises. According to National Negro Business League, the number of business enterprises had risen from 20,000 in 1900 to 40,000 in 1914. In that period, banks had risen from 4 to 51, undertakers from 450 to 1,000, drugstores from 250 to 695, retail merchants from 10,000 to 25,000. Perhaps the most celebrated of these new enterprises was that of the millionaire Madam C.J. Walker, a St. Louis laundress who invented the first successful hair straightening process. We all know about Madam C.J. Walker, but she did her thing, man. And this is, like I said, this is all before the civil rights and the baby boom and integration. We We had all this stuff going on, even during the most harshest of racism and segregation and prejudice and Ku Klux Klan lynchings and white mob lynchings. We had all this stuff going on, and we just let it go because we thought the ice was better and colder. In addition to development of business enterprise during this early period, foundational Black Americans displayed an active role in the area of inventions. They participated in significant numbers in the development of the nation during its earlier years. There are records which show that as early as 1789, foundational Black Americans found it difficult to borrow money in order to establish business enterprises. Nevertheless, through hard work and thrift, many were able to do so. In order to generate capital, pay attention to this because I talked about this in a previous video, the problem that I was having in raising capital. In order to generate capital, Blacks organized mutual aid societies for mutual assistance. These mutual aid societies were combinations of secular fundraising and religious institutions. Many of these societies also provided some form of insurance for their members. You see, this is the group economics that we used to practice back in those days that we don't do anymore. That was destroyed. Everybody's out for their own, right? Especially that's what the baby boomers did. They were out for their own. They got their good jobs. They said, F all y'all. We don't care. We got our good jobs. But during those times, we were practicing group economics. And that's how we were able to get all these businesses and Black businesses that we had. We were able to do that because we went to each other for our financing. In addition to mutual aid societies, and because of the success of many foundational Black Americans, there was trade and money lending. Before the Civil War in the North and South, the clients of foundational Black American persons were interracial. Interracial, that means white folk. However, whenever they became very successful, Euro-Americans tried to disrupt their business. There were laws passed by some states which made it very difficult to make their enterprises successful. Do you understand that? So when they talk about we don't deserve reparations, let them hear that. The government prevented us. Even when we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, quote, as they say, and developed our own businesses, and our businesses were becoming successful, the government passed laws to prevent our rise. And this is why we need reparations to compensate us for that, for us being hindered from economic development. Let us continue. At the turn of the century, commenters and scholars were as excited as Durham, North Carolina, as they are today about Cuban American experience in Miami, or the Korean American experience in New York City and Los Angeles. W.E.B. Du Bois noted after visiting Durham that there is in this city a group of 5,000 or more colored people whose social and economic development is perhaps more striking than that of any similar group in the nation. This was a Black town that often is overshadowed by Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Black Wall Street, but it was just as prosperous, if not more. Sociologist E. Franklin Fraser, in complimenting the business acumen of Black Durham businessmen, noted that as we read the lives of the men in Durham who have established the enterprise there, we find stories paralleling paralleling the most amazing accounts of the building of American fortunes. We find them beginning their careers without much formal education. They didn't have degrees. They weren't I'm a PhD. And practicing the virtues of the old middle class. These men have mastered the technique of modern business and acquired the spirit of modern enterprise. Durham began as a financial district as early as 1907. In many publications throughout America, it was called the Wall Street of Negro America. The strength of one of its larger firms, the Mechanics and Farmers Bank, is demonstrated by the fact that it helped most, if not all, the foundational Black American businesses in Durham to survive the Great Depression, a feat which the majority of American small businesses were unable to match. One observer wrote that a common feature of the Negro business interests in Durham is the fact that not one of their group organizations failed during the period of depression. Just as Japanese were able to develop economic success in California at the turn of the century, foundational Black Americans were able to do the same. Although other cities throughout the country were not as strong as Durham, foundational Black Americans in other cities also developed a strong middle class which was grounded in entrepreneurship and the professions. In cities throughout the country, entrepreneurship flourished in part because of the structure of racial discriminations. Stories of successful businesses run by free foundational Black Americans in both the North and South since the 1700s have been passed down throughout the decades, drawing ideas from the experience of foundational Black American business person Booker T. Washington, who the late great Marcus Garvey was inspired by. Sought to organize Black businesses nationally. In 1900, Booker T. Washington spearheaded the development of the National Negro Business League to encourage enterprise. The League was founded on certain fundamental assumptions which are designed to 1. Generate high character, 2. Develop racial respect, 3. Develop economic stability, and 4. Lay the economic groundwork for future generations. It was the economic experience of foundational Black Americans, the economic opportunities available to them as they organized to take advantage of them, and the organizational efforts of Booker T. Washington in this regard that inspired and attracted Marcus Garvey, the consummate advocate of Black self-help, to the U.S. So I conclude with that, but look, man, we had it. We had things going on before civil rights that if we would have kept those up, we probably as a people would not be in this predicament that we in now. Where we on the bottom and we being flushed out every day by the influx of illegal immigrants coming into this country. They're being hired for cheap labor. And even the high-skilled immigrants coming on HB1 visas, taking all the tech jobs. So now we are in a predicament where we're hanging on a string for our survival. And as I said, we were failed. We were failed by them old Negroes, by the civil rights era, by the Black baby boomers. We were failed by them. And that's my contention, and I'm gonna stick with it. But we can do something. We can do something. We still have a chance, I believe. We still have a chance. It's gotta be a radical. We gotta make a radical change, man. We gotta make a radical change as a people. We need to look at some of the principles of Amos and Wilson, Dr. Amos Hill Wilson. We need to look at the principles and works of Dr. Claude Anderson. And we need to really put those things, we really need to implement it. We not just read it, not just get in book, clubs and talk about it, but we need to start really implementing some of those ideas if we're going to save ourselves, because the time is up. We ain't got no more time. So with that being said, this is your brother Jay International tapping back in once again. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and I will holler at y'all later. Peace.